Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 176, and I'm continuing the tale of Zobeida from 1001 Arabian Nights. Now, you might remember that her sisters got off and gotten married again in hopes that they were going to find happiness at this point in their union with a gentleman. And Zobeida had taken some of her wealth and purchased goods and set off on a sailing trip to increase her wealth through trading in a distant land. All had gone well until the ship had been blown around for 20 days in a storm. And after that storm abated, they saw some land, they headed for it, anchored in the harbor, and off Zobeida goes into the town to explore. And she gets into this city and all the people are turned to stone. And she goes through the palace, everywhere in the city and everywhere through the palace. Eventually night comes. She had seen one room that had candles lit within it and a canopied bed. And it made her believe there must be somebody there. But who it was, she had no idea. And so she ends up trying to get back to the ship, loses her way, finds her way back to the room where the canopied bed is, and tries to sleep, can't sleep. And she suddenly hears a sweet voice, chanting verses from the Quran. So she gets up and she finds her way to a room, and as she looks in through the open doorway, she can see that there's like a place of worship. There's an open Quran there that's up on a pedestal. There are some tapers that are lit, providing light. And it looks like, somebody must be there. And the chanting has stopped at this point, but she peers in around the door. And sitting there on a cushion, on a beautiful carpet, is a very, very beautiful, handsome young man. And Zobeida can hardly believe her eyes. And she enters the room. And as she does, she greets this man. She greets him in the most pleasant of ways and basically calls him her deliverer. The words, if you can imagine, here she's been lost for all this time and sees this living person who is reading from the holy book, the Quran. And now she just feels like, okay, everything's going to be okay, because this person is aligned certainly with the truth of that book. And he turns in amazement to see a person there, and she says, please, tell me, what is it that's happened here? And he says, I will tell you, my sweet sister, but first, tell me, how have you arrived here? And she says, I will tell you everything. And I have to tell you, she was completely taken by this young man. Poems are written about how people fall in love in an instant. Of course, it doesn't happen as much these days as it used to then. It seems like everything just takes a lot of time in order for people to fall in love this day and age with, online dating and, I've got to check person out on in fact, people can never even meet and think that they're going out with each other in these days. But Zobeida was completely taken by this young man. Her heart was captured. Her eyes filled with joy at just beholding him. His beautiful form, beautifully struck eyebrows over clear, bright eyes, curly locks, a small, slight beard on his face, clothed magnificently, but beneath it she could tell that he was a man of form, beautiful figure. She sat down across from him. He bade her welcome to a cushion that was sitting there. She sat down, and she told him the story of, well, having left the port, all these goods tossed around on the ocean, and eventually coming to rest in the anchorage outside the city. He called it great fortune, as did she, and both of them now were beginning to enliven this unusual and miraculous connection that had taken place. Well, Zobeida presented the possibility of him returning with her. And not before, though, she pressed him again to tell the story of what had happened to his city. He consented. And he told her that his father and mother were both stone. His father was the black stone figure that she saw in the throne room. His mother in the women's chamber that she had passed, the beautiful pearl necklace that was no longer a pearl necklace. He went on to tell her that everyone in that city, his mother and father included, had been Magian believers, Zoroastrians, and they had believed in fire and worshipped fire. And at a certain point in time, a voice was heard through the entire city that the people of that city were to praise the omnipotent God, the one and only. And everyone ignored it. Now, he had been born to his father and mother late in his father's life, and his father had showered him with every type of affluence, every type of beautiful upbringing. It just so happened that there was an old woman that was living in the court with them who taught him about the Quran, who read verses to him, and who told him over and over again that he should worship but the one God. I had taken this to heart. It seemed everything that he had learned from the Quran and this old woman made much more sense to him than anything that he had learned from the palace priests, from his father or mother about belief and religion. Now this voice from out of the skies proclaimed again the same thing. And it said, praise the merciful God and only the merciful God. But they again ignored. And a third time this voice came. And after that, everyone in the city was cursed, except him. The old woman who had taught him the Quran and all those verses, she'd passed away some short time before all this took place. So he was the only one left in the city alive and had lived there for some time since. Well, the two of them delighted in each other's company. The rest of that evening into the morning, they slept but little. He had consented to return to Zobeida's city. And so in the morning, they went through the king's treasure chamber, and they grabbed what was light but of great value and returned to the ship. All were happy to see their return. The anchor was weighed, and they set sail off for Zobeida's hometown with the guidance of this young prince, soon to be Zobeida's husband. Now, when they returned, it was a surprising thing, but who was living in Zobeida's house again? Her two sisters. Again, their marriages had come to naught. They had been cast away, but they knew where to come back to. And they were living at Zobeida's home, knowing that the doors were open to them when she returned with her new man. Now, when they met him, they were envious. Neither one of them had been able to find a man like him. And all was well for some time. The marriage ceremony took place, and all of them lived in the home together. It was quite pleasant. And Zobeida and the young prince wished again to go off sailing on an adventure of trade. And so it was agreed that they would. And the sisters agreed to come with them. And so a ship was made ready, all was provisioned, and off they went with a great amount of goods. One of their thoughts had been to return to the city of the prince and to make off with much of the treasure of the king. Wouldn't you, knowing that it was all there? And so they set sail. The winds were favorable. The prince knew by the stars where to guide the ship. The ship captain was experienced and had no problem bringing the ship into that anchorage. Well, Zobeida and the prince with some servants went off from the ship, and returning to the palace, the king's treasure chamber, filled baskets and chests full of treasure, made their way back to the ship. After some days, ship weighed anchor and set sail again. The company all was merry, because there was great wealth now on board the ship, and whether they did anything with the goods they had brought to trade, the voyage would be successful. They began to sail, and there was some discussion as to where they would go, as is often the case in sailing adventures. And we'll leave the company there, upon the seas, heading, it is said, north-northeast. Favorable winds, beautiful seas, but a discussion as to where they will go next. Okay, thanks for joining. Join again to hear what happens next.